The courtroom was a pressure cooker about to blow. Tensions ran high as Judge Reginald Calloway, a man renowned for his iron-fisted rulings and whispers of corruption, adjusted his glasses and leaned back in his chair. Across the aisle stood a figure of unwavering composure, a black woman in her late 30s, her tailored suit as sharp as the defiance in her eyes. Calmly, but with a voice that carried like a thunderstorm, she addressed the judge. "Your Honor," she began, "before we proceed, I think it's only fair you know who I am." The words were simple, but their impact was seismic. Cut to Judge Calloway. His smug smirk begins to waver. He adjusts his tie, his confidence visibly shaken. Confusion turned to curiosity, and then to alarm. The judge's facade of unshakable authority cracked as silence blanketed the courtroom. Every eye was on her, and every heartbeat seemed to sync with the unspoken question. What led to this explosive moment? Who was this woman standing so boldly before a judge known to silence his critics? And why was he the one now looking over his shoulder? To understand the gravity of her words, we must first go back to where it all began. A seemingly ordinary traffic stop that would unravel a web of deceit, power, and betrayal. To understand how she ended up challenging one of the most powerful judges in the state, we have to start here. Meet Zaria Kincaid, federal prosecutor, martial arts enthusiast, and a woman with an unshakable resolve for justice. After years of dismantling high-profile crime syndicates, she came to Willow Creek for peace, to escape the chaos of her career. Inside her home, Zaria sets the groceries down, glances at a framed picture of her and a man in military uniform, and sighs deeply. The camera lingers on the photo before cutting to her checking emails on her laptop. But peace was elusive for someone like Zaria. The scars of her past, both literal and emotional, wouldn't allow it. She had faced down cartel bosses, exposed corrupt politicians, and even survived an assassination attempt. But nothing could have prepared her for what was about to unfold in this quiet town. Zaria driving through the quaint streets of Willow Creek. It's a bright day, but a police car with flashing lights pulls her over. The officer, Deputy Marshal Glenn Forster, approaches her car with a smirk. "Your license and registration." Zaria calmly complies, but raises an eyebrow as the officer begins listing a series of infractions she didn't commit. What should have been a routine stop quickly spiraled into something more. The fine wasn't just steep, it was absurd. But what caught Zaria's attention wasn't the amount. It was the condescending tone, the thinly veiled mockery, and the barely hidden agenda behind it. "You think you can waltz into my courtroom and play lawyer, pay the fine, or face jail time?" This was the moment Zaria realized she wasn't dealing with just a traffic ticket. The more she dug, the clearer it became. This was no coincidence. Calloway's courtroom wasn't a house of justice. It was a den of exploitation. Zaria, late at night, surrounded by stacks of legal files. She discovers a pattern of predatory fines and unfair rulings, all disproportionately targeting minorities and the poor. Judge Calloway wasn't just a bad judge, he was a dangerous one. A pattern of abuse emerged. His courtroom a weapon wielded against the vulnerable. And now, Zaria Kincaid was in his crosshairs. Zaria leaving the courthouse after filing an appeal. A black car idles down the street, its driver watching her intently. Later that night, as Zaria walks her dog, headlights flash behind her, and a car speeds past, narrowly missing her. Her refusal to back down didn't go unnoticed. Threats began to surface, subtle at first, then unmistakably hostile. But Zarya wasn't the type to scare easily. Back to Zarya in her living room, practicing martial arts with calculated precision. A close-up of her determined face fades to black. She had faced danger before, but this time, it was different. This time, the enemy wasn't in the shadows. It wore a robe of authority. Now, Zarya, sitting in a law library, scanning through a thick dossier on Judge Reginald Calloway. She flips through pages of dubious rulings, his bias evident in the countless decisions that have left victims of injustice without recourse. Her fingers tap the table in frustration. Zarya Kincaid wasn't someone to back down in the face of adversity, but the deeper she delved into Judge Calloway's past, the more she realized that this wasn't just a personal vendetta. It was a matter of public safety. Corruption ran deep in his veins, and he'd spent years exploiting the system, ensuring only those who were either corrupt or weak remained safe from his gavel. Cut to Zarya, seated in the dimly lit office of her small apartment. Her laptop screen glows with articles detailing Judge Calloway's controversial decisions, fines for minor infractions, wrongfully convicted defendants, cases dismissed with no clear reason. Well, each revelation, the stakes grew higher, but Zarya was no stranger to playing with fire. She was willing to face whatever dangers lay ahead, so long as the truth came out. She just needed that one piece of concrete evidence, the smoking gun. Back to the courthouse, where Zarya steps into Judge Calloway's courtroom for the second time, this time with a clear purpose. She stands before him, calm yet unwavering, her case file in hand. Your Honor, I demand an investigation into your conduct. There is a clear pattern of injustice, and the people deserve to know the truth. Judge Calloway leans back in his chair, a condescending smirk creeping onto his face. He adjusts his glasses and motions to the bailiff. Miss Kincaid, if you truly think you can lecture me in my own courtroom, you're gravely mistaken. The room falls silent as tension builds. Zarya stands her ground, but Calloway waves her off dismissively. It was clear from the start. Reason and logic had no place in Calloway's courtroom. His arrogance was as sharp as his judgment, and he was confident no one could touch him. But Zarya wasn't easily intimidated. She knew the danger she was walking into, but for her, the truth was more important than the fear of retribution. Now Zarya leaving the courthouse, her face a mask of determination. As she walks through the parking garage, the sudden screech of tires echoes, and she's ambushed by two men in dark suits, emerging from the shadows. They had been watching her every move, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, but Zarya wasn't the type to go down without a fight. The moment turns into a high-paced action sequence. Zarya, with lightning-fast reflexes, uses her environment to her advantage. She knocks over a metal cart, creating a shield as she retreats toward her car, her hand reaching for the concealed firearm under her jacket. With precision and tactical finesse, Zarya disarmed her assailants one by one, leaving them sprawled across the cold concrete. They were trained, but she was better. Cut to Zarya in the driver's seat of her car, her foot slamming down on the gas pedal as she speeds out of the garage. In hot pursuit, two black sedans follow her. The high-speed car chase begins, tires screeching, engines roaring, as the cars weave through the city streets. As the chase escalated, Zarya's driving skills came to the forefront. With her adrenaline pumping, she darted through narrow alleys, her SUV barely missing pedestrians as she made sharp turns at breakneck speeds. Her enemies were relentless, but Zarya's instincts were sharper, her mind calculating the next move ahead of time. Zarya swerves around a corner, sending the pursuing car into a building. She glances back, ensuring she's lost them, before pulling into an underground parking garage. As Zarya exits the car, breathing heavily but composed, She walks up the stairs, the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. Her phone buzzes. It's a voicemail from her older brother, Jamal, who had been wrongfully imprisoned years ago after being framed for a crime he didn't commit. For Zaraya, this wasn't just about corruption in the courtroom. It was personal. Her brother Jamal, framed for a crime he didn't commit, had been the driving force behind her desire to fight for justice. His wrongful conviction had torn their family apart, and while she had fought countless battles to free him, the system had failed them both. Flashbacks of a younger Zaraya visiting Jamal in prison, his hands gripping the bars as he tells her not to give up. The look of determination in her eyes as she vowed to fight until the day he was free. Her resolve wasn't just about a corrupt judge. It was about righting a wrong that had haunted her family for years. Every threat she faced, every obstacle thrown her way, only fueled the fire burning inside her. She clenched her jaw with determination as she listens to Jamal's voicemail, reminding her that justice was worth every sacrifice. Zara Kincaid wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her family, for the voiceless, and for every person who had ever been crushed under the weight of injustice. And she wasn't about to stop now. It was late in the night. Zaria, walking through an alleyway, her senses alert as she carefully checks her surroundings. The sound of distant footsteps echoes, but it's too late. The moment she turns the corner, several men emerge from the shadows, their badges flashing in the dim light. Zaria didn't believe in coincidence. She knew the moment she stepped out of her car she was being followed. But she didn't expect to face the full force of the judge's corruption. Not here, not now. The men, all wearing police uniforms, are members of a secret task force working under Judge Calloway. They've been ordered to capture her, no questions asked. "You should have backed down, Kincaid. This is bigger than you." And the officer grinned. Zaria's hand snaps to her side, where a concealed weapon is hidden beneath her jacket, but before she can draw it, the officers lunge toward her. A chaotic fight ensues. Zaria fights back with precision, using her hand-to-hand combat skills to take down one officer with a swift elbow to the ribs. She's fast, fluid, and every move is calculated. She dodges a punch, countering with a spinning kick that knocks another officer off balance. Every strike, every block, every maneuver was part of a rhythm Zaria had perfected over years of training. She didn't just defend herself, she anticipated her enemy's moves before they even made them. She disarms one of the officers, using his weapon against him to take down another. The remaining officers hesitate, realizing they're dealing with a force far more skilled than they anticipated. Zaria takes advantage of the moment, spinning around and sprinting into the night, her heart racing but her mind focused. Moment transitions to a rooftop chase. Zaria scales a fire escape and leaps from one building to another, narrowly avoiding the officers in pursuit. They're close, but Zaria's agility and speed give her the advantage. Zaria wasn't just running to escape. She was running toward something. With every rooftop she crossed, every alley she sprinted through, she knew the danger was intensifying. But it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about exposing the truth and bringing the corrupt system to its knees. They follow her as she leaps from one rooftop to the next, barely avoiding a set of gunshots fired by the pursuing officers. A sudden twist, one of the officers falls, his gun clattering against the concrete. Zaria hears the noise but doesn't stop. She can't afford to slow down now. The city below her was a maze of secrets and lies, but above the rooftops, Zaria had the upper hand. At least for now. Now shifts to a secure meeting room. Zaria meets with an ally, Detective Marcus Kane, a man she's worked with before in the past, someone she thought she could trust. He hands her a folder of documents, and she scans them quickly. Her face pales as she realizes what's inside. Marcus Kane had been more than just an ally. He had been a friend. But as Zaraya scanned the folder, the truth became undeniable. The documents pointed to a far-reaching conspiracy, one that connected the judge to the very criminals she had been fighting to expose. Worse still, Marcus's name was on the list. He was one of them. Zaraya looks up, her eyes cold with disbelief. Marcus stands motionless, his expression unreadable. The tension in the room is palpable, thick with the weight of betrayal. You? How could you be part of this? I trusted you. Marcus shifts uncomfortably, but doesn't answer. He looks away, unable to meet her gaze. The betrayal cut deeper than Zaraya had imagined. Marcus had been feeding information to Judge Calloway's network all along. He was never a friend. He was just another pawn in a game Zarya had yet to fully understand. Cuts to Zarya walking away, her face a mixture of anger and betrayal as she tries to process the gravity of the situation. In the distance, a black SUV pulls up silently, a set of darkened windows obscuring the identity of its occupants. Unbeknownst to her, Marcus has already made his choice. He's given her up. Zura wasn't just fighting the corrupt system. She was fighting a battle against her own allies, against the very people she had trusted to help her bring justice to the city. Now shifts to a dimly lit conference room at Judge Calloway's mansion. A hidden meeting is taking place as the judge, now aware of Zaraya's true identity, receives the intelligence that she's getting closer to exposing him. His face contorts with anger and fear as he stands up, his voice laced with malice. No, she's getting too close. She needs to be eliminated before she destroys everything we've built, Judge Calloway said with an angry tone as he turned his face toward his lieutenant, a cold smile creeping onto his lips. Realizing the woman who had dared to defy him was more than just a local prosecutor, she was a federal agent with a history of dismantling criminal organizations. Judge Calloway knew that Zaraya Kincaid was a threat that could not be allowed to live. Cut to a hitman sharpening a knife in a dimly lit room. The sound of the blades scraping against the steel is ominous as the camera pans to reveal a framed photo of Zaraya on the wall, targeted for elimination. With a target now painted on her back, Zaraya's battle had just become far more dangerous. The judge wasn't going to let her expose him. He was going to make sure she never had the chance. Fast forward to a quiet, dimly lit room. Zaraya sits at a desk, staring at a photograph of her younger brother Jamal in a frame on the corner. Her fingers lightly trace the edges of the photo as the sound of rain tapping against the window plays in the background. The weight of the moment hangs in the air as she reflects on how far she's come and the personal cost of everything she's sacrificed. Zaraya Kincaid had always been driven by a singular force: justice. But justice wasn't just a career for her, it was personal. Her brother, Jamal, had been convicted of a crime he didn't commit. The system, the same system she was now fighting to expose, had failed them both. Flashback. A young Zaraya stands in a crowded courtroom, her expression one of barely contained fury. Jamal, a teenager at the time, sits in the defendant's chair, shackled, as the Judge Calloway, the very man Zaraya now faces, delivers the verdict. It was Judge Calloway who had sentenced Jamal to prison. A mistake, a careless mistake, had sent her brother into the hands of a broken system, a system that was supposed to protect the innocent, but had instead imprisoned him for a crime he didn't commit. In the courtroom, where Zaraya, a young and idealistic attorney at the time, watches in disbelief as her brother's life is taken away. Her face hardens as the gavel falls, and the weight of that moment sears into her memory. That was the moment everything changed. Zaraya's career, her life's work, became a fight not just for justice, but for her brother's freedom. The pain of his wrongful conviction carved a scar deep within her heart, one that would never heal until she took down those responsible for putting him behind bars. Flashback shifts to Zariah, years later, standing in front of a row of high-profile criminals as they're being led away in handcuffs. Her expression is calm, but there's a fierceness in her eyes. She had taken down dangerous people before, drug lords, corrupt businessmen, violent gang, but this was different. The man she was about to face was more powerful than anyone she had ever come up against. The man she had detained. Over the years, Zariah had taken down some of the most dangerous criminals this city had ever seen, but with each victory, she'd made more enemies. Every conviction, every arrest had come with its own threats, warnings, intimidation, and subtle but deadly pressure. And yet, she had stood tall, never backing down, never letting fear control her. Fast forward to a dimly lit office, where Zariah is on the phone. Her voice is firm, but there's a hint of fatigue in her tone. "They can threaten me all they want, but they won't break me. I will bring justice to this city, no matter the cost," Zariah said firmly to herself. Zariah had become a symbol of unyielding strength in the face of overwhelming odds. But the deeper she dug into the corruption of Judge Calloway, the more dangerous her fight became. Her brother's wrongful conviction haunted her every step, pushing her further into a world of shadows and deceit. There was no going back now. Moment transitions to Zariah standing by the window of her apartment looking out over the city. The rain has stopped, and the city lights twinkle below. Her reflection in the glass mirrors the determined look on her face, a woman who has seen too much but refuses to give up. The stakes had never been higher. This wasn't just about taking down a corrupt judge. This was about righting a wrong that had plagued her family for years. Her fight wasn't just for justice. It was for Jamal. For herself, for everything she had lost. Zariah's eyes narrow, and her hand tightens around the photograph of her brother. She stands up straight, her decision made. There's no turning back. She won't rest until she has taken down Calloway and exposed the corrupt system that imprisoned her brother. Zariah knew the risks. She knew that continuing down this path would put her life in jeopardy. But for her, there was no other choice. Every piece of evidence she uncovered, every fight she had fought, every threat she had endured, had brought her one step closer to justice. And she would see it through, no matter the cost. She walks over to a map pinned to the wall, a series of red strings connecting various locations. Each piece of evidence she's uncovered over the past few weeks points to Judge Calloway. Zariah places the photograph of Jamal in the center, a silent reminder of what's at stake. Every thread, every clue, every lead had led to this moment. And with the walls closing in, Zariah was ready to finish what she had started. The moment lingers on her face for a moment, her resolve unwavering. The next chapter in her fight for justice is about to unfold. Zariah Kincaid wasn't just a prosecutor. She was a force, and in the coming days the city of Brookhaven would learn that she would stop at nothing to expose the truth. The screen cuts from black to a stormy night in Brookhaven, the city's skyline silhouetted by flashes of lightning. Zariah Kincaid, her face shadowed with determination, stands before the gates of Judge Reginald Calloway's private estate, an imposing mansion hidden behind iron gates and high walls. The camera zooms in on her steely gaze as she assesses the heavily guarded property. This was it. Zariah had everything she needed to take down the corrupt judge, evidence that would expose the web of criminal activities and bribes that had poisoned the legal system for years. But to get it, she would have to face the full force of Calloway's protection. Zariah slips into the shadows, expertly navigating through the estate grounds. Her body language is precise, calculated, every movement a reflection of years of combat training and field experience. The estate is silent, save for the occasional footsteps of guards patrolling the perimeter. She crouches low behind a large hedge, watching as two guards pass by, unaware of her presence. Zari had trained for moments like this. Years of hand-to-hand combat, firearms expertise, and stealth maneuvers had prepared her for the most dangerous situations. But tonight, every skill, every instinct, would be put to the test. She moves swiftly, ducking behind a large stone fountain, then dashes for the mansion's back door. She silently picks the lock with expert precision, slipping inside. Inside the mansion, the tension builds. Zariah silently makes her way down a long hallway, her eyes scanning for any signs of movement. She approaches a study at the end of the corridor, the door ajar. The sounds of murmured voices reach her ears. The judge wasn't alone. In the study, two of his most trusted associates, corrupt law enforcement officers, are discussing their next move. They don't know Zariah's inches away, listening. They have no idea they're about to make a fatal mistake. She listens for a moment, then, without hesitation, enters the room with lightning speed. A swift roundhouse kick takes one guard out of commission, and, in one fluid motion, she disarms the other with a quick twist of her wrist. The second guard falls to the floor, his weapon skittering across the room. Under her command of the entire gang of serving Marines is the carrier. Brutality lurks when the conflict becomes violent, and less than 4 days before the men believe that she has suppressors, Zariah dominates the gang from higher-up servers to country boys seeking tactical precision, to incapacitate the men who once thought they were untouchable. But Zariah isn't here to play games. She's here for evidence, and she's not leaving without it. She grabs the manila folder from the desk, stamped with the words "classified," and scans its contents in an instant. Photographs, bank records, confidential communications, all the proof she needs to bring down the entire corrupt network. But as she turns to leave, a loud bang echoes through the hallway. Zariah spins, her instincts kicking in just in time as a guard fires at her from the shadows. The bullet grazes her shoulder, but she retaliates with pinpoint accuracy, returning fire and hitting her target in one swift motion. Zariah's reflexes are honed, but there's no time to waste. The danger has just escalated, and now every second counts. The moment shifts to an exterior shot of the mansion as gunfire erupts from within. The night sky is lit up by flashes of light, the sound of gunfire cutting through the storm. Zariah emerges from the mansion, her steps sure, but the situation is far from over. The moment shifts abruptly to Brookhaven Courthouse the next morning. The camera zooms in on the front doors as Zariah steps inside, the weight of the classified evidence she's carrying heavy in her hands. Her entrance is met with silence from the courtroom spectators. The judge, Reginald Calloway, is seated at the bench, his face locked in a grimace of contempt. He has no idea what's coming. Armed with the evidence she had risked her life to obtain, Zariah was about to confront Judge Calloway in the one place he thought he was untouchable, the very courtroom where he had so often wielded his power and corruption. As Zariah steps to the front of the courtroom, the room falls eerily silent. The weight of the moment is palpable. She places the manila folder down on the judge's desk with a quiet thud. Calloway's eyes widen, his smug expression faltering for a brief moment. Zariah locks eyes with him, defiant, unyielding. "You thought you could silence me. You thought you could bury the truth under lies and corruption?" Zariah said calmly but steely, while excommunicating. She gestures to the evidence in front of him. "But you underestimated the law, and me." The room is stunned into silence. Calloway's hands tremble as he reaches for the folder, but Zariah doesn't give him the chance to examine the evidence. She turns to the jury, her voice loud and commanding, cutting through the tension. This is the evidence that proves Judge Calloway's involvement in a criminal network that extends far beyond this courtroom. This is the proof that will expose him for what he truly is, a man who uses his power to manipulate the law and destroy lives for his own gain. The moment shifts back to Judge Calloway's face, a look of sheer panic slowly creeping in. His eyes dart to the door as if he's planning an escape, but Zariah is already 2 steps ahead. She pulls out a recording device and hits play, revealing his voice from a private conversation, one where he discusses how he plans to get rid of those who stand in his way, including Zariah herself. It was over. Judge Calloway could no longer hide behind the facade of innocence. Zariah had played the game, and now it was time to watch him fall. As Zariah finishes speaking, she steps back, and the courtroom erupts in whispers. The judge, exposed, is left speechless, the walls closing in on him. His empire of corruption is crumbling right before his eyes. The final shot lingers on Zariah's face, fierce, victorious, and unbroken. She has done what no one thought possible. She has taken down the most powerful man in the city. For Zariah Kincaid, this battle was just one victory in a war that had been raging her entire life. But for Judge Calloway, the fight was over. Zariah standing tall in the center of the courtroom as law enforcement moves in to arrest Calloway. Her mission was complete, but the cost had been great. Justice had prevailed, but not without sacrifice. The moment transitions to the final moments of the courtroom drama. Judge Reginald Calloway is led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. Law enforcement officers surround him, guiding him down the steps toward a waiting squad car. The camera lingers on Zariah as she watches the moment unfold from the back of the courtroom. Her face is stoic, but the weight of the victory is evident in her eyes. Judge Calloway had been exposed for the corrupt tyrant he truly was, his reign of manipulation and power finally brought to an end. But for Zariah Kincaid, the battle had cost more than just her time and energy. It had demanded her heart, her soul, and every ounce of her strength. Zariah walks out of the courtroom, her every step measured but resolute. As the media frenzy begins, cameras flash in her direction. Reporters rush forward, eager for her thoughts. Zariah stops at the steps, her gaze steady as the reporters swarm her. She clears her throat before speaking, her voice carrying across the chaos of the moment. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Her words ring out, and the reporters, momentarily stunned by the weight of them, fall silent. Zariah doesn't flinch under the barrage of questions, her focus unwavering. The battle had been won, but the war for justice was far from over. As Zariah reflected on the case, she knew the cost of her fight, the sleepless nights, the close calls, the personal sacrifices. It had all been worth it. But justice, she knew, was a never-ending pursuit. As Zariah turns to leave the courthouse, the camera pulls back to reveal a shadowy figure standing just outside the building, hidden in the distance. The figure's face is obscured, but the sense of danger is palpable. Zariah doesn't notice, her back turned, as she walks into the light of the outside world. Her fight against corruption may have ended here, but Zariah Kincaid knew all too well that the shadows always linger. The battle had been won, but new threats were already on the horizon. The shadowy figure became more visible. It's clear that this person is watching Zariah closely, their intentions unknown but ominous. The figure steps back into the darkness, and the scene fades to black. Who is this mysterious figure? What do they want with Zariah? And what price will she have to pay for the justice she seeks? Stay tuned for the next chapter in the saga of Zariah Kincaid, where every truth uncovered only leads to more dark secrets waiting to be revealed. What would you have done in Zariah's position? Would you have fought back against the system, knowing the risks? Share your thoughts below in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more action-packed, true crime stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat.